Just to note under item 1 that the meeting is being streamed live and recorded by the council for subsequent broadcast via the council's internet site. So I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. So I'll start with myself. I'm Mark White and I'm chair of this committee. To my left.
Hi, Councillor Pippa Connor. I'm vice chair of this committee and I chair the Adults and Health Scrutiny Committee.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Anna Lawton and I chair the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Adam Small and I chair our Housing, Planning and Development Scrutiny Panel.
And just the officers present, plus we have our cabinet members, so to my right.
Yeah, Dominic O'Brien, Scrutiny Officer.
Katie D'Souza, Head of Legal Services.
Donna Carlin, Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Services.
Tara Nees, Corporate Director for Finance and Resources.
Josephine Lysett, Director of Finance.
Thanks, everyone. And we've also got Councillor Ganesh here. She's just temporarily out of the room, but she'll be in here very shortly. Okay, so item 2 is apologies. We don't have any apologies for absence. Item 3 is urgent business, and we have nothing under this item either. Item 4 is declarations of interest. So do any members have any declarations of interest to make relevant to the items on the agenda today? No, I can't see any. Okay, item 5 is deputations and questions, etc. I don't believe we've received anything under this item. So moving on is minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, item 6. This is to agree the minutes of the meeting we held on the 19th of February this year. Just to note that there are some outstanding actions from that meeting that are going to be followed up and responses are going to be circulated to the committee. So other than that, does anybody have anything to bring up under any questions of accuracy or anything else related to the minutes? No. Okay, so are we happy to agree the minutes of that meeting as an accurate record of the meeting? Okay, that's agreed. Item 7 is minutes of scrutiny panel meetings. So this is to receive and note the minutes of the scrutiny panels. There was a scrutiny panel, the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel met on the 15th of January. Seems to be missing my list here, but
Oh, sorry, it's only penciled on one side, so I think it's just the next.
Yes, yeah. So there were several. There were scrutiny panel meetings under the under this item. Does anyone have anything to raise under the minutes of their panels before we just take these as noted? So are the minutes that are noted, minutes that are in the papers? We're happy to just note those and move on. Okay, so that's noted. Right. Then we move on to item 8. So item 8 is comes from a resolution we made at our last meeting, where we resolved to invite the police to attend this meeting to give us some information about how crimes of sexual exploitation are recorded and classified. This comes from something that came out of Councillor Connor's panel back in December, I think, where there was concerns raised about the lack of any information about group-based sexual exploitation happening in Haringey. I was under the impression, I had been assured that the police would be coming to this meeting to provide us with a written report. Unfortunately, I was told late last week that this written report would not be provided. It wasn't possible to provide that. I then said that nonetheless, I would like the police to come in any case, even if they aren't able to produce a written report, so that they could give us some verbal information. It appears that they feel that they're not able to do that. I'm not particularly happy with that. It seems to me like that was quite a simple request about how crimes of a particular type are recorded and classified. The idea was supposed to be that we would then decide, based on what we heard this evening, how we thought scrutiny should take that forward in the new municipal year. Now we have no information. We've asked for information that would help us to figure out how much crime, group-based sexual exploitation crime, is occurring in Haringey. The police appear not to know, or to be unable to provide us with that information. So I suppose what I'd like to know is how the committee would like to take this forward now. Councillor Connor, do you have a?
Thanks, Chair. So yes, I think we're all really disappointed the police aren't here tonight to give us an update, because this came through our safeguarding report, as you've noted, and yeah, we were told that when we were asking about grooming gangs, we were told that there weren't any in Haringey, but actually when asked, it was all about the data, and they didn't have information from the police around this. So we really wanted Ovian Scrutiny to be looking at, doing a review into this based on Baroness Casey's 2025 National Audit Report, but we needed the police data to start that process. So I'm wondering, Chair, if we can recommend, and obviously this will be completely down to the next Ovian Scrutiny Committee, but we put it forward as a recommendation from ourselves that we would like the next committee to ask the police to come and provide the data, and that any future review could be done based on the framework of Baroness Casey's 2025 National Audit Report, because I think in that she deals with a lot of the issues, and especially picks up areas that are relevant for the council, and how we do that joint partnership work with our NHS colleagues, community safety, adults, children's housing. It cuts across the whole area, and the police. So I think it would be really helpful if the OSC could sort of commit to that, and then hopefully the next Ovian Scrutiny Committee will also be able to do that once they've got the information that they need. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. Councillor Gunness, you had some comments.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to understand, what was first of all, it is disappointing that the police are not here to sort of give us any kind of information, verbal updates. That would have helped us to shape the recommendation we can make, like how to look into this case. I suppose I completely agree with Councillor Connor's recommendation. I think it should be part of the, going forward. It's something that we cannot basically ignore it. It needs to be explored, because we have responsibility towards young people, and some of those young women might be, or children, teenagers might be our looked after children, and therefore councillors have like a corporate parent responsibility towards this young. And I think it's really important that Haringey is obviously taking the right measures to protect its young people. So I'm happy to support that. I just wanted to also understand what reason or apologies, did they give us any reason why they're not able to be here?
I'm not aware of any reason being given. I got communication that said that it was not feasible to produce a written report in time, and I then said, well, I would still like the police to come, because I think this is quite a simple request. It doesn't require a detailed report. It's just a question about how these kinds of crimes are recorded, how they're classified, so that we can see what information is available to the council in forming a policy to respond to these, frankly, heinous crimes. And I'm not aware of, I've not personally received a response to this. So does anybody have any further comments to make on this. So the recommendation from Councillor Connor is that we as a committee make a recommendation to the next iteration of this committee after the elections take place on the 7th of May, to take forward a review of group-based sexual exploitation in Haringey, based around the recommendations of Baroness Casey's review. So are we happy to make that recommendation? Yes, Councillor Gunnar.
This committee might be too busy, or its workload might be just as a backup plan, because this is very much a safeguarding kind of concern as well. So maybe we could add that either of them, either children and young people's panel or overview and scrutiny. So that way it's like we are making sure that one committee is looking into this in detail and giving and making recommendation to the council that will basically inform the policies and the safeguarding processes.
Sure, and in fact, it's entirely up to scrutiny when it's formed at the full council meeting towards the end of May. It's entirely up to scrutiny how, you know, what the panels are and how they divide up the work. So we're just recommending to kind of scrutiny as a whole, and you know, it can be taken forward through whatever panels exist, or through joint working, or through the main committee. That's up to scrutiny to decide that. I'd also like to make sure that this doesn't get lost. So I think this should form part of a handover report that would be part of the work programme that would go forward to the work programme of the next committee. So, okay, so are we happy to agree that as a resolution, and we'll end this item here for now? Okay, all right, thanks. That's agreed. Okay, all right. Right, so then the next item is item 9, which is the Q3 finance update, which is to consider the budget report on the council's finance position at the end of Q3 of the current financial year 25-26. And this was part of the agenda papers for cabinet meeting that took place yesterday on the 10th of March. So I'm going to hand over now to Councillor Carlin and Taryn to introduce this report. Oh, just to note that because there's a staff awards event this evening, we haven't got the service officers available to respond on this item. So if there are any service related questions which Councillor Carlin and Taryn aren't able to answer tonight, the directorates have committed to providing written responses. So just to note that at the outset. Thanks.
This report provides an update of our financial position to the end of Q3 of 25-26. It is encouraging to note the improved position and the improved position that we've seen throughout this year. To remind OSC, at Q1 we were predicting a £34 million overspend over and above the £37 million of EFS for this financial year. That was reduced to 23.4 million in at the Q2 report, now been reduced down by another over 4 million to around 19 million. Of note is that of that 19 million, we have £8 million of historic parking arrears and parking debt. And although that's disappointing, and it's because a lot of work's been done to make sure that to look into that debt and into our financial position. The historic parking debt is historic, and so it is not a service pressure that we will see carrying forward to next year. Now, as as I'm sure the committee is aware, that when we see service pressures in one financial year, we need, if it looks like those are going to carry on, we need to account for that in the following year's budget, so that we right-size the following budget. So the fact that we've seen improvement in service overspend, especially in our two largest services, service improvement again of adults and temporary accommodation, this is very good news. The other thing that we've seen is over the year is reduced capital spend, and again that is good news because that means the revenue implications of that we're not seeing them this year, and in some of those cases we will not therefore again see it next year. The housing revenue account is also showing an improvement with reduced overall expenditure of 1.3 million, and that's to do with contractor performance management across. It's basically across the piece, the work that's been done on the HRA, and once again lower capital financing costs due to slum slippage, and that has resulted in the reduced spend in the HRA. As I've noted, in terms of our capital account, we do throughout the year, the capital program and the capital spend is challenged. Tara chairs the capital board, and the spend is challenged throughout the year because we're always looking to reduce capital to ensure that the capital that we spend is either going to deliver savings or deliver income, or it is emergency work that has to be done now. And the council has really tightened up. If I look at where we were with capital when I first became the cabinet lead back in 23, the program is it's substantially tighter than it is. We no longer have things in the capital program that we aren't absolutely sure of that we're going forward with. We are pleased that the government's recognised the need for additional funding for boroughs such as ours, and in actual fact, we were given an additional. We thought we were going to get an additional £17 million over 3 years. It's actually going to be over £25 million of additional core spending from the government, with an additional £17 million in next year's financial year, then tapering off. We've also seen increases in other grants such as homelessness grants, etc., that are coming through. And we know that when we come out of this period, the government has said that they are going to be fully covering the cost of SEND, which will obviously be very helpful for all boroughs, including ours. So we are seeing, as I said, an improved position as to the end of Q3. This will have implications, and I understand from the monthly reports that officers have seen that that in actual fact this improvement is continuing and is even better at period 10 than it was at the end of 369 period 9. So it's continued to improve, and this is really important because obviously we are in a position where we need EFS to close our budget gap, and the less overspend that we have this year means that though we've asked for 84 million, it will improve the position in terms of how much we will need next year, and will also improve the position in terms of how much we need this financial year. So I'd like to thank in front of this committee, I think we need to thank officers across the council for the hard work that's being done to monitor spend, we've done a lot of work to reduce agency spend, to really kind of look very carefully at every pound and every penny. There's still work to do, and there's still places that we can go to make savings, but we certainly are on the correct journey for us to become financially sustainable within medium term. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carlin. Did you have stuff to add? Yep, sure.
I could just add a couple of bits, and Councillor Carlin has covered most of it, but just really wanted to draw the committee's attention to, as Councillor Carlin said, a steady improvement in the forecast over the period, and we're reporting 19 million. That is before the use of corporate contingency, which you will have picked out in the report. That currently at Q3 stood at 8 million that was uncommitted. Now, contingency is for unforeseen events, and we've still got a couple of weeks left until the end of the year end, but we're expecting minimal commitments against those. So anything that's remaining of that corporate contingency, that 8 million, will reduce that 19 million even further. So I haven't brought that in. You will notice in the report a few things that we have brought in at Q3 that we would normally bring in at the year end. So in particular, bad debts provision, use of reserves, external finance. Usually that would come in at year end, but I think you're quite familiar with my approach now. I think it's really important that we share those with you at Q3, so we give you a much more accurate forecast. I suppose as councillor, and I should say that overspend is on top of it, just in case it was anything was unclear about it, that overspend is on top of the 37 million of exceptional financial support. So it's definitely a positive move and a move in the right direction. But we absolutely acknowledge that there is still significant pressures that we are dealing with. And I suppose if you ask me, what are the reasons for the reduction kind of through the year? I think, it will be a combination of factors. I mean, I've talked about all the controls that we've put in place, and I think the detail is set out in Appendix 10 in the Finance Recovery Plan. I do also think, both in budget setting and in monitoring, our accuracy of forecasting has improved as we've gone through the year. And you'll see in the appendices, particularly the use of activity data to drive some of those forecasts. So, we've seen less volatility, I would say, in the second part of the year. And as Councillor Carlin said, we have seen a further improvement at period 10, and we'll continue to monitor that at period 11. I suppose it's a really positive picture. We are still carrying some risks, I think, at the year end, and you would expect me to say that. We have done quite an intensive piece of work on parking and adult social care level of debt, but there are other, and commercial property, actually, that's one of the drivers for the variation, but there will still be some other areas that we will need to look at year end. Savings, just in case you haven't picked up, quite a, we can put all of the controls in place, and that is having an impact. What I would say, and you will pick up from the report, we are still not where we need to be on the delivery of savings. So if we, I think you probably heard me say this when we were going through the budget process, that really does need to be our focus of attention. And that's why we consciously didn't put lots of new savings in. If we can turn around those delivery of savings and, some of the overspending commercial property, for example, which is my area, that straight away puts us in a really positive position. So that will be our focus for next year. And I suppose the last thing that I would say is we have seen that steady improvement through the year. We do set our budget at a point in time. So just to give you some assurance, and I think Councillor Carlin has alluded to this, we will be taking this latest information to really understand what pressures, particularly where we're seeing an improvement in adults and temporary accommodation. In the adults, you will see from the numbers that some of that is down to reduced placements. So we just want to see what impact that had on next year's budget, and hopefully a positive impact on next year's budget, as opposed to quite often it goes the other way. We've underestimated the pressures. So hopefully that gives you a kind of outline. The report includes the usual appendix on write-offs, and there is again, we've really tried to build the level of detail on the capital programme as well. Thanks.
Thanks. So I'll just start off with a couple of questions myself. So first, just on the improving picture, it seems to me that the improvements in those demand-led services are more on the demand side than on the price side. So it's because of a reduction in demand rather than the price we're paying per unit is dropping. It seems from the papers anyway. And I just wonder if we might see price rises coming through now with, you know, what we're looking at, what might be the economic effects of some of the things that are happening globally. So that's my first question to you, Taryn. And then my other question is to you, Councillor Carlin. I just wanted to pick up on what you said about the sustainable financial position being achievable in the medium term, which you mentioned and you put in your cabinet member introduction at 2.5, and I'm just wondering how feasible that actually is. We're talking about the medium term being like, you know, 5 years, yeah. Given that even with the extra government funding and even with the improvements that we're seeing, and even if those are improvements to continue at the same rate, are you really saying that that overspend and that need for EFS is feasibly going to drop down to zero in the space of just 4 or 5 years? It just doesn't seem to me that the figures quite add up to that at the moment.
I think I'm not suggesting that it's going to be easy. I think there's certainly work to do around capital, just in terms of borrowing. I'm not suggesting it's going to be easy, but I think that we're heading in the right trajectory. I mean, personally, and I'm speaking personally, I'm not speaking for Taryn. We have asked for 84 million for next year, but given the number, the way that the numbers are moving, the additional funding that we got for next year, the the council tax that we can assume would be at a 5% level. The government is saying, provided we continue on the trajectory that we're on, I do think that within a 5-year, within that medium term, we can get a sustainable budget. I'm not saying that it's easy. And the council, we have to be really strategic, because we're not going to get there by making our plans. You've got to be looking at, and if it's my phone, Torrance phone, one of our phones, got to be looking at really strategically across the council. It may mean investment in some areas where that's going to save us money, as opposed to, you know, so it's got to be a really strategic, a strategic position. But I do think that it is possible. I also do think that there's a likelihood that we're going to end up seeing more money coming into local government. We've been given a 3-year settlement. We've got the changes to adult social care coming through. Certainly within the next few years, I'm expecting to see the government's report and those changes coming through. That's where we have to focus on, and that's where we have to aim for. Yeah, I personally, I do think it's achievable. I know it seems like a really big gap at the moment, but I'm not. You know, we put a big our current budgets based on a period in time, makes assumptions about where we're going to be with things like adult social care. The costs are rising considerably. You know, our demand-led pressures. if we had looked at the beginning of the year with the increases that we were still seeing at the beginning of the year, we wouldn't have thought that adults is going to end up at the end of the year probably in budget, unless something else happens by the end of the year, which means that in terms of pressure and growth for adults next year, there's growth in that budget for adults next year. Probably aren't going to need it if we continue to see the trajectory that we're on. So obviously nothing is certain, but I do think, I think the important thing is for us to focus on that medium term horizon, to do everything for us to be sustainable, all the kind of spending controls across the council, etc., all the things that we're doing, but also the important thing, as Taran said, in terms of getting income for our commercial portfolio, for example. You know, those are the kinds of things where we may need investment, but that's not delivering us income at the moment. You know, we're sitting with a large commercial portfolio, corporate and commercial portfolio, that's not bringing in income. And so, combination of raising money, continue to bear down on spending and on capital. I think that if you look at other councils, there are councils that death spiral, but there are councils that come out of EFS, and we need to be one of the councils that comes out. Sorry.
Thanks, Councillor Conley. If I just cover your first question, Councillor White, and it is a variety of reasons. So if I just summarise for the three main demand areas, actually children's has remained fairly steady through the year, and that's largely the overspenders down to kind of delivery of savings, and we've been reporting that from Q1. In terms of adults, and Councillor Carlin has alluded to the, you know, the even more recent forecast is showing an even further improvement. It's a combination of price and demand, actually, and I think certainly the movement that you've seen since Q2, we have seen a forecast reduction in spend on placements, and that is a combination of numbers, but also we make a provision each year in the budget for inflation on our adult social care contracts, but ultimately you don't negotiate contract increases until in year. So, you know, that is always a provision, a budget that you never quite know, because you know, some of those negotiations are still underway actually at the moment as we approach the year end. And it was really important for me that we allowed sufficient, and there will be an underspend on that. So it is a mixture of not necessarily that prices have come down, but within our budget we assumed that prices would be higher than what they are. So that's really kind of the adult space, but it isn't just around placements and demand. And yeah, and you'll see in the appendix on adult social care, you know, the recharges. We've worked very closely with health to ensure that we get the right contributions for those that have got joint care packages or CHC, and some of that improvement is in that space as well. In terms of housing demand, and again shown, you know, actually all credit to both services. Actually, they've worked extremely hard through the year in housing demand. So in temporary accommodation, we are still seeing steady numbers flowing through, but actually our prevention type offer is really strong in Haringey. So we are seeing more people come in, but equally we've got a whole range of initiatives that we are managing secure permanent homes or kind of more secure homes for individuals. So as much as we're seeing people come in, we're managing to support. We are still seeing, however, the high prices in the nightly paid accommodation. I think I've been talking about an 18% increase when we budgeted at 10%. That has shown a steady plateau over certainly the last couple of months, and looking at the latest forecast. I think in answer to your question, it's probably the first time I've been asked the question actually about what's the impact of, you know, kind of what's going on in the world at the moment and possible impact on prices. That is a risk we are carrying, and I think it is more the impact, I think, in the current year, given we've only got 2.5 weeks left, is probably fairly limited. My biggest risk is going into next year. So we would have made an assumption around interest rates on borrowing, and when we set the budget only a couple of weeks ago, we were actually on a downward trajectory towards that 2% inflation that government was setting, and interest rates were showing a steady decline, and we would have budgeted on that basis, you know, investment income, etc. So we are carrying a risk in that space. Utility bills, we know we do operate our own buildings, you know, kind of corporate landlord model, and you know, we've just managed to mitigate the pressures that I've been reporting all year. That is a risk that we've got going in. In terms of, look, it's a bit of unknown. I have to, but I,
So in terms of that, of course, that's going to affect everybody and everything. It will affect the government, it will affect every single council. And so in terms of, you know, what Rachel Reeves said recently in terms of the support, or was it Keir Starmer said one of them, but I think, no, it was Keir Starmer, but in terms of support, that they recognise that they're going to have to provide if this war carries on. There's a recognition from government as well. So it's obviously a risk, but it's going to be a risk for every single part of the country. It's a risk for everybody and everything. And so I think that we have to see it in that context, and what support then the government's going to provide to all authorities, and authorities like Aranga.
and I just said in terms of how we might be able to mitigate that risk in, because, you know, there is, our influence, I suppose, on that impact is quite minimal, and kind of it will affect us directly, but also indirectly to our contract as well. We did, and you know, I know we're talking about the in-year position, but you can't talk about 1 year without talking about next year. We did increase our corporate contingency quite significantly for 26-27. That stands at 25 million. Not necessarily anticipating what we are now potentially experiencing, but just a level of uncertainty. So I suppose it is a risk. We have got some contingency to manage all of our risks, of which this is just one of them. So we will need to keep an active watching brief. We will actively engage with our external Treasury management advisors to see what the potential impact will be.
Thank you. So I saw Councillor Small first.
Thank you very much. Can I just, Taryn, you were just saying about the demand remaining pretty steady in children's services, and yet there's only been 17% of savings delivery, and yet in adults and housing, where that demand has fluctuated, and our predictions about the costs and so on were more conservative than they perhaps needed to be. Those services have been able to deliver many millions of savings through the year. What do you think has been successful in housing and adult social care that on the delivery of those savings that hasn't carried across into the potential 2.5 million that could have been saved in children's?
Yeah, and in terms of children, so essentially that delivery of savings is solely based around, so every directorate was set 5% staff savings target. So that non-delivery of savings is almost entirely related to that, whereby there just wasn't the scope to deliver those in 25-26, but it is assumed that they will need to, well, the budget for next year assumes that they will deliver them for 26-27. But so it's solely around that one saving in children's. In adults and housing demand, they had, I suppose, a more variety of savings. You know, that they each had their 5% staff savings target, like we all did, and you'll see a bit of a consistent theme that some directorates have achieved and some haven't in the current year. But they also had a range of initiatives around reducing demand and increasing the supply, therefore reducing the demand on kind of bed and breakfast, hotels, nightly paid accommodation, and I think we put it in the report in the appendix. That has proved really successful. So it's almost they had and they have delivered on their 5%. So they had a bigger, I suppose, a bigger basket of savings to deliver, and they just have been more successful. Just children's, it is around their staffing pressures that we have seen that, but as we say, we are assuming that they will be delivered in full next year.
Is there a sort of lesson in that around future budgets and saving? That makes sense, that having different levers to pull and some being more successful than others, so that the delivery of savings in future years isn't just reliant on certain mechanisms which may be less successful? Is there something we can carry forward so that when we're looking to services to save, we're trying to delve into sort of as many pockets as possible to find where that's suitable, rather than just through like the staff savings and so on.
I think also it just also depends on the service. So where there's actual scope. Children's runs a pretty tight service in terms of what they're doing, which is not to say obviously that you can't always look for savings. But children's pretty tight. Anne knows her budgets, and she knows, when you see how they project manage, how safety valve was working, all that kind of stuff. Children's tight. Other services not necessarily quite as tight. There's also, it's not just a bigger basket, but there's more scope to tighten up and to actually do things differently. So as we mentioned, in terms of adults, that financial assessments, making sure they're done at time, making sure making sure that the NHS is paying, that health are paying what they should be paying, just focusing around all the kind of financials. There's still work that can be done in adults. There's not as much scope in children's, generally, just in terms of they are quite tight. Which is, I'm not suggesting that there's nothing that can be done, but I think there was certainly work that we, coming out of the pandemic, we ended up in housing demand using a lot of hotels. We got one hotel, then we ended up with 3 hotels, hugely expensive. Nightly paid, the costs of nightly paid went, it was underestimated how much the cost of that was going to increase. When I was the cabinet leader, it was actually cheaper than long term. We hadn't put the costs up for like 10 years. So there's a scope, huge scope for that cost to rise a lot. So there's been a lot of work around both of those, and there's work in other areas of the council. But it's not just about what is put forward within a directorate. It's what scope within the directorate there is. And that's why it's not strategic necessarily to go, each directorate have to put everything on the table, something on the table, all that kind of stuff. Because in some areas, there's more scope to make savings than in others. Some areas we may need to invest to deliver more savings, etc.
Oh, sorry, Tyne, did you want to come back?
I think I've again spoken quite openly. That's the downside of setting targets, isn't it? It assumes that there is the same potential and I think there probably is still some scope. But what I would just add to Councillor Carlin is probably when we set so when I recommend the budget, in an ideal world, you have that absolute assurance around the delivery of their savings. So not just around the numbers, but that the changes are being made to deliver the savings. We probably weren't as strong as let's hope we are for 26-27 when we set that budget back in 25-26. So we should have had the real evidence before that budget got to council of how that 5% would have been delivered, or all savings actually would have been delivered. And we probably weren't as tight as what we should have been for 25-26 when we set the budget. And I think we need to be honest and open about that. And that's why, to our Finance Recovery Board, that's the main focus of that work, is about to make sure when we say that, because it's in our gift. If we put forward a saving, that is implying that we can deliver it. So that is what we are absolutely focusing on. And I think we're in a better position for there weren't many, I know, but the fewest savings that we put in for 26-27. So I think we need to be open and honest about that side of things as well.
And just one final question on this area, and it is slightly beyond the scope of Q3, but as it's the last scrutiny, if you could just indulge me for a moment. The stuff around the safety valve programme and government taking SEND funding in-house, we don't really know, as I understand it, we don't understand the details and the mechanisms of that. Personally, I think that the likelihood of the government going into a general election after the end of the next 3-year spending period saying they're going to cut or take out of the budgets of local authorities whilst they assume this funding is unlikely. How much are we spending in that area currently if we were to assume that that money were no longer to be spent on SEND because government are covering it, but it also wasn't going to be taken out of our budget? How much of that would be closing our sort of structural deficit year on year? I'm being optimistic.
Unfortunately, very little. That's probably not the answer that you wanted me to say, was it? So we're still waiting for the finer details. So if I just share with you what we do know at this stage. So we've had the letter to say that safety valve is ending on the 31st of March. So safety valve as a programme is ending on the 31st of March. But I have to say, you know, the initiatives and what we're doing and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve is still having an impact and reducing the costs of, particularly on the high needs block. So what we do know is that for 25-26, we will receive a grant for 90% of our dedicated schools grants deficit, which is solely driven actually by the high needs block, which is around SEND. Now, we're waiting for the detail, but the indications are that 10% will need to be funded by local. Actually, before I say that, I should say they have confirmed no authority that was part of the safety valve programme will be worse off. So I think that's a really important aspect to note. So, you know, government has put funding in over the years for safety valve, but equally the council has. So I think certainly a big question mark for me as to what does that look like in terms of what we have contributed over previous years? And I don't know the answer to that. We'll wait to see the detail. We do know in the current year that essentially they'll be looking to local authorities fund 10%, so that's a split. We don't know the percentages for future years. It could be that they would fund all 100%, as Councillor Carlin implied earlier. The slight complication in it all is that the statutory override that we've probably all been talking about for, I think, about 5 years now at least, that remains in place until 2028. So what that means is if an authority doesn't have the funds to fund that 10%, then it doesn't come into their general fund balance until at least 2028. Let's assume the statutory override goes. So we've got some decisions that we need to make about, you know, how do we fund potentially a deficit that could land on our books in 2028. So we're waiting for the kind of the detail around that. You know, some will choose to, you know, fund it steadily over the next couple of years. Others maybe think, well, actually, I'll be more financially sustainable in 3 years' time. Actually, I'll wait till the statutory override goes. So there's still quite a bit of uncertainty in that space. In terms of the direct impact, and I think this is set out in the Q3 report because we've got the Treasury Management report tomorrow, Audit Committee, but it is in this report. We estimate, so I've always said, and I've talked about this since I've been here, that although there is a statutory override in place, and in theory it's a negative balance, that money still needs to go out to schools. It still gets paid to schools. And therefore, that is balances that we are not holding and gaining investment income. And we forecast that as a general fund, we will lose about £500,000 in investment income as a result of the DSG deficit. So everybody had this view that because there's a statutory override, it doesn't impact on the general fund. Actually, it does, and it always has done, because we're losing out on that investment income that we could otherwise have got for using those balances elsewhere. And, you know, local authorities have probably only just started to talk about that over the last couple of years because you know, interest rates have been higher, investment income has been higher. So there's no direct, I suppose there's no changed impact from the changes to safety valve, but I just wanted to echo that point that there is already an impact on us because of that level of investment income.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Connie, you had some questions.
Thanks, Chair. So my first question is around the savings. So we discuss this every year, but we've come to this point. So on page 30 on your table 3, if I'm reading this correctly, it looks like 44% of savings are not going to be made. So I hear what you're telling us tonight about, you know, all the mitigations around that. But I suppose what I will come back to is that every year when we sit here and we go through and every year we say, oh, these savings are going to be made, and we have that confidence. Now, I hear what you're saying about this new format of going through the evidence. So I suppose for me, when we're saying about the financial sustainability, looking back, even if we take the best case scenario of the £8 million contingency fund being added to that 90 million overspend, we're still looking at £48 million, aren't we? And we've got 37 of that as exceptional financial support. So our budget is worsening at the moment. It is progressively getting worse, although hopefully not more than that. So I suppose it's really around the the evidence that you'll be able to come to scrutiny with in the following year around how you're reporting that evidence that you're looking at within the committee to provide that extra reassurance to councillors that that next round of savings will be more achievable, I suppose. So that's my first question. Thanks.
So I mean, you picked up correctly, 44% are not on track to be delivered. You would always expect some non-delivery, but, I would normally expect 10%, 15% in a worst case scenario. So that is, I can't sit here. That is not a great position to be in. And that is why, for me, it was really important going into next year that we didn't layer more and more new savings on, and actually then people forget about, because one of the challenges I think, also one of the factors I think that may have caused the financial position, it's lots of things, including demand, including price, is have we always delivered the savings that we said we would do? So, we've been reporting overspends over the last couple of years that have been kind of funded one way or another. Some of that overspend will be because we haven't delivered the savings. Now, quite often when you put new savings in, people forget about the previously approved ones, but actually our budget assumed that they were all delivered. So I think, we could debate this all night, and I debate it with myself all the time. Was it the right approach not to put lots of new savings on top of what is already planned already? And I do think it's right, but we need to commit to delivering not only the ones that are in the current year, but also the future savings that have been previously approved. In terms of the assurance piece, I suppose there's a couple of things. We have got more challenge in the run up to the budget process. Have we got enough challenge? I don't know if you can ever quite have enough challenge and enough assurance, but certainly much better than where we were in 25, 26, and both budgets were mine. So I'm actually talking from my own kind of my personal experience of how I approach things. We have also, and actually we're just kicking off, although the current year hasn't ended, we're already progressing on to next year. We have tightened up the monitoring and reporting, which I've kind of said probably through the year. I think you've heard me say it's not just about reporting the numbers, it's about reporting the changes and reporting progress on changes that are needed to deliver the numbers. We probably haven't monitored and reported that as strongly as what we should have done in year. So that is where we absolutely need to get tighter. I would also like to see strengthened narrative reporting to Cabinet, to Open Scrutiny Committee, so much clearer guidelines around if something is red or amber. Actually, we don't just say it's on track or mitigations are going to be found. Actually, you as members should have much more detail about, well, what's the action that's going to be taken, and I think that should be documented in a public report like this. So you'll see a lot more detail kind of going forward for you to be able to scrutinise both here and at various panels. I suppose the other guidance that we will put in place is a RAG rating is always subjective. Me rating something as red could be different to Josephine rating something as red. So we probably haven't challenged through the year the green RAG ratings. And so we quite often focus on the reds and the ambers, but that is where services have been open and transparent about, look, I'm not on track to deliver. And then you see an explanation. where our biggest risk is those that reported green through the year, whereas actually then you get to the end of the year and they could turn red. But then, end of the year, you're either red or green. You're not amber because you either delivered it or not. So I do think there is much greater scrutiny on both the RAGs on the numbers, but also the RAG ratings on the delivery of the changes. Do you want to add?
And also, I suppose there's something about doing a bit more of that challenge in regards to the profile of the savings. So Tara's spoken a lot about some of the savings will be delivered that weren't delivered this year will be delivered next year. There's a question about getting that right and strengthening that particular process. People talk about lead times needing a little bit, a couple of months before you start embedding the change and seeing the actual outcome of that change in the savings. So I think that's something again that we can also strengthen going forward.
So my second question was sort of following up on that and just thinking about us as scrutiny committees. We put a lot of time and effort obviously in scrutinising this, and we hopefully we can ask the challenging questions. But I suppose sometimes it's difficult for us to see what, if anything, has changed as a result of where we've been challenging all these sort of, so I know we've sort of discussed before about where scrutiny sits within reports, and I think, at the moment what we have is the system where the report goes to cabinet and then obviously we see it afterwards, but we're always seeing it post the decision making. So my understanding of scrutiny is that we were supposed to be feeding into sort of that process. Now I know we haven't done it like that, Councillor Carlin, over many years, but I do know that it does happen elsewhere in different ways. And I'm just wondering, even if we don't get that, is there a way of sort of tracking recommendations that we make with yourselves in the finance part of it? Just because we have increased the amount of committees, the work we're now doing, obviously on this, and for all the right reasons. But it's just really understanding, so we can go back and say, well, hang on, 6 months ago we asked for this, and this report we never. Sometimes things get lost, so I'm just wondering if that could be strengthened a bit. Now that's obviously opened for the next, committee to sort of look at, but I'm just sort of saying it would be maybe helpful for councillors, especially if they're new onto a committee, how that's tracked and how that's progressed, because we've been doing it for quite a while now, but others may not be.
The response that was given last night by the monitoring officer is really key here, which is that constitutionally, what OSC does is it scrutinises the decisions of the executive. May not be the same in other boroughs, I don't know. That's what OSC does. So you scrutinise across the board, whether it's budget or anything else. If once the decisions are made by the executive, cabinet papers, etc., then that's the scrutiny. Generally, you scrutinise the actions of the executive. The advice from the monitoring officer last night was that if you wish to pre-scrutiny, you would need to that we need a constitutional change.
And I think just on your first question, I mean, I think that's a really good challenge. I always think you only see the reports once a quarter. We shouldn't rely on you having to remember, right, what did we discuss at quarter two, and therefore kind of quarter three. So I think it's a really good kind of comment. So let's take that way. There are a couple of ways that we can do that. We can either do it as a result of the narrative in savings or the forecast. It's not just the savings. It might be that we want to more formally kind of log as an action in the action tracker to then come back to when the next finance report comes in. There's a number of different ways. So I do actually think that's a really good point to make. So I'll take that way, because you should never be expected to understand or remember the conversation that you had last week, let alone last quarter. So thanks.
Going to ask if that could be a recommendation, but I think Taryn's already taken it away as an action, so I don't know how you want to word that, Chair, if that's
Well, I mean, I think
Taryn's.
yeah, I think the way you've set it out is fine as an action. Yeah. Okay. Did you have any more questions?
I've got one more question. Sorry. It's on capital. I noted on page 43, the capital disposal, you were looking at a whole amount of about £20 million over a period of time. But I noted that up to now, there's 800,000 of that being achieved. And I think from memory, was it 1.2 million you're hoping to have progressed in the next year? It was on page 43.
Check, is it capital receipts from
Yes.
disposals or is it capital receipts
It's
flexibility?
disposal yes, it's
Yeah,
it's the
9.17.
disposal policy at 9.17. So I suppose my question is that I know it said that 11.3 was in progress, but going on to the next point, it said to date approximately 800,000 of capital receipts been received, up to a maximum 1.2 further could be receivable before the end of the year. So how do you feel this is going? So I don't know, because I'm not selling in this climate. Is this something you're happy with? Is this the 11.3 in the next couple of years? What's the background to that? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So the total amount was agreed when the disposals policy was agreed by Cabinet back in June, and we will agree a business as usual I'm going to say business as usual disposals program each year. So there'll be a further one coming up to Cabinet for 26-27. What that does is it agrees a disposal as a set of assets. You never quite. This is a really and I chair disposals board, so I'm quite close to this. The timing of it, I suppose it's a bit like selling a house, isn't it? You always anticipate that once you've made a decision to sell, that okay, it will go through extremely quickly, no issues. Actually, this is what we've learned, I think, from this year, is that you can't always predict an accurate profile. So we were expecting all of those made the decision, all of those disposals to materialise in the current year. We have looked at them through all through disposals board, so I'm confident that they are progressing. However, just the timing, the majority will now fall into 26-27. So the disposals that we agreed in 25-26, the actual income will come in 26-27. But similarly, next year we'll agree a similar programme, and I think probably a lesson learned is to be a bit more pessimistic or a bit more accurate on when we think those timings of receipts are. So you can still make a decision on a disposal, but actually the forecasting of when those receipts came in, we probably should have been a bit more realistic about whether they would all come in the current year. So I've got confidence that they will be achieved. It's just that they're going to be delayed until 26-27.
Thanks. I had a question actually. Just looking at in terms of the improved position to the revenue budget, there was 1.9 million that was picked out in 6.6 that is predominantly it's interest, reduced interest payments, which is predominantly due to reduced spend on capital programs. So obviously that's a positive benefit to the revenue budget, but it represents a significant slippage in the capital program. So what's going wrong in terms of like the planning, the profiling of the capital projects that's leading to that issue?
It's a combination of two things. It is planning and profile, but the whole time we have to be looking at not spending money and not borrowing. So, throughout the year, everything has to be challenged, whether it's in the program or not. Have the circumstances changed, and is it possible for us to not borrow that money? We're not in a position where we can just go, oh, well, we put it in the budget, so we're definitely going to do it. Put it in the budget, but we will still continually challenge throughout the year. Do we actually have to spend that money now? Is this something that we have to do now? Are we still in the circumstances where we have to spend it? Because borrowing money is so expensive. Just this relatively small slippage, you can see millions of pounds. Like, if you think, how much do you have to cut to actually achieve millions of pounds from services to actually achieve millions of pounds? Not borrowing money is really key to that, and to that, and to us being sustainable. So everything has to be challenged. I do agree. We could, we need. There's always work to be done in terms of when we put in a project, and it's much better than it used to be, because don't forget, when I became the cabinet lead, projects were just put in on the off chance. They just put them in, and then they'd say, "Oh, don't worry about that. It's just there in case we need the money." We're not, but then then you've also got to put into the budget borrowing costs, and that's just how it was done. It's not done like that at all. But it's and it's also, can we find the funding anywhere else? Can we? It's a key part of reducing our spend, is reducing our borrowing.
I get the point. Just to come back on that a little bit, I get the point that we need to be only spending what we need to be, what we need to be spending in terms of the capital program, and that makes a lot of sense. But are we then getting better, and will this then be an improvement in the 26-27 budget when it comes to getting the right amount of money in the capital program, and therefore getting the planned spend on interest more accurate as our budgetary kind of process improves?
Yeah, and I think I can give you more confidence on new schemes going in the programme. So we've got new capital governance. Well, it's not new anymore, actually. It's been in for almost a year. We are, much tighter on profiling and timing of new schemes. There is still a number of historic schemes that we're still working our way through. The very nature of capital is that it's not quite as predictable as revenue. And when you look at, I think it is paragraph 6, I did write it down earlier, paragraph 9.6 onwards, what I've tried to do is highlight the top schemes where there is slippage, and actually quite a lot of them are our big regeneration schemes, significant schemes. Or another area is what I call them rolling programs. So that could be roads, it could be schools, it could be my commercial property, or it could be where we are trying, and we've done it in some cases for 26-27, where we don't want to just put a lump sum in the capital programme. We expect to see a schedule of works that sits behind that, and we have improved that in a lot of cases, but not all of them. So I think, Councillor White, I feel more confident around 26-27, but I think there are still improvements to be had on the kind of profiling of capital spend. And it's across the general fund and the HRA. And I know we haven't talked about the HRA in much detail, but it's 100 million slippage on the HRA, and it's 45 million from Q2 to Q3 on the general fund, and yet it would be much higher compared to the budget that we set at the start of the year. So there is something about timing, but there also is something about ambition in terms of, sorry, not ambition, optimism in terms of how quickly a capital scheme can be mobilised. And often a trap that we all fall into is we forget how long it takes to get through a governance process. So actually a capital programme just gives you the ability to spend. There is still a decision to be taken as to whether to spend that money or not. And quite often as officers, you underestimate that it could take 2, 3, 4 months. Actually, if you look at some of the reasons for the slippage, there's a couple of themes actually, and one of them is delays in procurement process and tender processes and tenders coming back. So you have the best plan in the world, but actually any kind of complication or something that you hadn't expected in either governance or procurement, for example, can absolutely have quite an impact on timing. So I think, Councillor White, is a combination of factors, but I do still think we are quite optimistic about, even if we had all the money in the world and it wasn't an issue, there is a limit to how much you can deliver in year, and that's what we're trying to tighten up on.
Thanks. And I think it is an important point that we need to be more mindful about how long it does take to get things done, get through all the different stages of governance, and not be making, and this isn't just about, specific capital programs. This is about across the organisation. My, nearly 8 years now experience as a councillor, we're constantly saying we're going to do such and such by a certain date, and it's quite frequent that that doesn't happen. And having a more realistic eye to how long it's going to take is actually helpful in communicating what we're doing to residents and giving residents confidence in our ability and competence to do what we say we're going to do when we say we're going to do it.
And actually, we brought in increased governance because we want a tighter grip on the capital programme around business cases and delivery. And therefore, things just even without the decision and constitutional governance, actually the internal governance means it does take slightly longer to do stuff. But then that is the right approach, because it's really important that we scrutinise a business case, make sure it's sustainable before it goes in the capital programme. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? So, but we just need to factor that into timelines to make sure that we've got the profiling right.
Councillor Connor.
Sorry, just a quick question, really. So at 9.14 on page 42, digital outcomes. So it's the bit that I've been sort of following for a while now. I'm just wondering what we're saying here when you say, so we spent 400,000 against the revised budget of 2 million, and it's linked to the service modernisation programme, digital improvements. So slippage into 26-27 will be requested to realign the timeline. Now, I'm asking this because in adults, when we're talking about the front door, and I've been told by officers that this is key to get our digital offer up and running, because that will help services for our residents, but also modernise our web pages and everything else that's going along with it, so people know how to contact us and how to access the right information. So this slippage, is this going to impact on future sort of service delivery, I suppose? But also, I was under the impression in adults and health that adult social care, that actually having this digital offer would give us some savings with that. And we've just been talking about that. So is it going to impact on those two aspects?
No, so, and this is one in my area, so I can talk quite confidently about this. So the service modernisation programme has been, well, it's been running for about 18 months, but really picked up pace over the last 12 months. And that is about improving technology and the way that we engage with residents, how we deliver services to improve the resident experience, as well as deliver savings, efficiencies, etc. The focus of that programme is it's not solely, so it's one of those programs where there is so much to do in this digital space. You can't do it all at once. So I chair the board. It's CLT. We've made a conscious decision, given that our pressures, particularly our spending pressures, are in adults and housing and temporary accommodation. We are particularly focus that programme around adult social care, housing demand and housing repairs on the HRA side of things, because those are not necessarily adult social care, but certainly housing demand and housing repairs have the biggest impact on customer services. And so there is absolutely that in place. Now, when we knew that we would need to make these improvements, we knew that we would need some investment. So this is an example probably of what I've just described in the budget for 25-26. We were saying, well, actually, we don't really know how much we need because we're only just starting the projects. Therefore, we put a provision in of 2 million. Not really completely evidence-based, but we knew that we would need something. So that the spending of that is governance through the Service Modernisation Board. So what we're saying is that it has taken slightly longer. I think it's really picking up pace in adult social care, housing demand and housing repairs, but it's taken longer to get started. So we thought we would spend 2 million. However, the nature of those projects, some of that spending is going to come in 26-27. So what that last sentence is saying is that we do still need that 2 million investment, not just in adults and housing, but across all the services that we want to do those projects in. But we were too ambitious about how much we could do in 25, 26. Therefore, when you're sat here when the committee is sat here in July, when you see September, you will see that the outturn report, we have carried forward that unspent budget. So what we're not proposing is to stop all of digital. It's just that we didn't get the profiling right. But yeah, there is a big focus in those 3 areas.
Thanks. Just to note, I've had a couple of questions through from Councillor Small, who unfortunately had to leave the meeting early. Similarly to what I was just asking, he wanted to mention the slippage on the HRA programme, and just point out that that budgeting for spend that we're not going to be making in the end puts pressure on the budget setting process, and I suppose that just relates to the discussion we just had. And he also wanted, and this might be for a written answer actually, but it was just about the 15.5 million write-off of parking debts. Seems like a large amount of money to accrue and then just write off and not get back. But maybe that's not for an answer from you, Taryn.
I'm happy to give a general answer, and then at a future panel meeting, they might, I think probably parking debt is probably that might want to explore in a bit more detail with the service. And I suppose actually, so Councillor Small's question relates to the particular write-offs that are referred to, and kind of essentially a very high percentage of the write-offs this quarter are in relation to parking. We have done quite an extensive piece of work on outstanding parking debt over the last, feels like the last year, but it's probably only about the last 4 or 5 months, because we had a high value of age debt and a high value of debt that had gone back a number of years. And I think the very nature of parking debt, there will become a time period when it won't be recoverable. So there are I suppose there's two aspects to draw your attention to. One is that we have increased the bad debts provision for parking. Now, a bad debts provision is very different to a write-off. So what that is saying is that we've looked at all of our parking debt, and we have to make an estimate based on a method of how much we think we'll be able to recover and how much we think we won't. And that's called your bad debts provision. It's not a write-off at that stage, it's just a provision. And so that kind of essentially 9.9 million that you see increase over the year, it's getting to us to a provision that we think is realistic. When you get to write-off, that is actually, you can make a provision, but you can still recover the debt. Doesn't stop you trying to recover it. When you write it off is when you're finally saying it's no longer recoverable. Now, if you've got your bad debts provision right, when you write debts off, it's not a hit to the bottom line because you're essentially charging it to that bad debts provision. So that's why it's really important to get the bad debts provision as accurate as possible. So when you do write off, so there are high levels. I think that is an outcome of that more detailed piece of work and a more realistic. I do all of the write-offs, and those over 50,000 go to Councillor Carlin. There are none in parking over 50,000, just to give you that assurance. But that is where we have tried all avenues to recover, and it is largely related to debt from essentially 2 to 3 years ago, which in the parking world, the chance of recovery is quite slim.
I'm just going to ask a follow-up to Councillor Small's question. So, sorry, just to be really clear. So on page 20 at 1.4, when you say there's an increase in bad debt provision for parking of 6 million, is that included in the 16.1 million that is the written off, or is this, it's starting again? Is this like the last year that's just been, have we just accrued £6 million, which we don't think we're going to be able to recover? I'm just not quite sure what that's saying.
Yeah, so this is gets quite complicated. They're two very separate numbers. And actually, if you do go back to Q2, I think you'll recall that the increase in the bad debts provision was almost the same as the amount that we wrote off in Q2, and I know it created some confusion. They are two completely different numbers. So we have increased our bad debts provision by the total of 9.9 million over the year. 3 million we did in Q2, and sorry, and then a further 6 million because we were still doing that work. And I think that is a more realistic assumption about what does bad debts provision. The write-off, they were approved at Cabinet last night as part of approving the recommendation. That, I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, that will get written off against the bad debts provision for parking. So it's not two numbers that you add together, they are two very separate numbers.
So is this new bad debt in the last year? Have we got, so where's this 6 million? Sorry, I'm just trying to really understand. Are we saying we think we're going to get up to £6 million more bad debt in parking? Or is this in the last year, we've just not been able to bring in the finance, the money from our parking? Sorry, I'm just trying to really understand what that is.
I know, and it's extremely complicated. So if you're looking at the table on page 29, I'll just let everybody get to that page. If you're looking at, the table on page 29, where we've got the column saying bad debts provision, where we're saying it's really the 9.9 million that you should look at. So what that's saying is we have said in 25-26 we need to increase our bad debts provision by a total of 9.9 million. Of which that is 6 million more than what we said in Q2. But as a total for the year, we're going to increase by 9.9 million. The work that we have done has been solely looking at outstanding debt and PCNs up to the 1st of March 2025. So it is the historic stuff that is previous years that we have then made a much more realistic judgment about those that are now. So what you will see over time is we have looked at all of those PCNs, we've increased our provision. When you see outturn, you are probably going to see a further increase in write-offs because we've looked at those PCNs, we've had to increase our provision. Those will then come through the system and are likely to be, a proportion of them is likely to be written off.
So are we going to have more officers in this sort of area to try and get those PCNs as they come through? Because this sounds like if it's been going on for years, then you just can't chase people. They've moved, time's passed.
And I think, that is a really important question. I think maybe it's an action to capture, to take into the panel at the next panel meeting when the service is there, because, the question is, what are we doing to increase our collection rates? And actually, I think Councillor Small has asked me in the past, what are our collection rates compared to others? Are we lower or are we higher? We're probably on the lower end, and therefore we do need to increase. We want to look at how we increase our collection, because you can issue all the PCNs, but actually the importance is the collection of that income. And we know that across the board. Actually, we've got other services, haven't we, where, I think it picks up on Councillor White's question to Councillor Carlin at the beginning around financial sustainability. It won't solve the problem, but it is really important that we are collecting the income that's due to us across all of our services. And I think parking is just one of them.
Thanks. And I suppose, obviously, this is, the actual issuing of PCNs and how they're followed up and how they're chased up. That would come under the panel rather than under the main committee. But this is a big number, 9 million. That is a big part, and that 9 million basically represents a difference between the amount of parking tickets that we thought were collectible when the budget was set and what we're thinking now. That's a big number. So, Councillor Carlin, could you put your when you speak, could you put the mic on?
I mean, historically, I know these are kind of historic parking debts. I know when I first became cabinet lead, wrote off, I think it was an outside, we wrote off something like 23 million. So we have been writing off consistently a large number of debts. So, yeah.
So the question for maybe the panel to take up would be, how does this compare with what's happening in other boroughs? Are other boroughs also writing off a similar amount of parking tickets? Are we issuing too many that then can't be collected for some reason? What are the systemic problems here? Or is it just the same in every borough? And is this just a matter of a problem at budget planning stage? But yeah, I guess that's something for the panels to take up.
A bit tired. I think that's a piece of work that needs to be that's being undertaken. It's certainly been a concern of mine. We have quite a large parking team. We need to make sure that it's efficient and that it's paying for itself and bringing in the income to pay for, its ring fence. It's not we don't issue PCNs to make money, but the service certainly needs to pay for itself and to pay for the transport that we needed to pay for.
Okay, thanks. But this is obviously coming out as a big number in big movement in the budget outturn and the quarterly reports. So maybe if we just note that this is something of concern to us, and when we do this kind of handover for the next iteration of scrutiny, we just note that it's a matter of concern for the committee, and that's something we think that the relevant panel needs to look into. Oh,
I think she said an action previously.
sorry, I think I might have missed that.
Sorry, Taryn, did you say there's an action on this bad debt provision? And you said that as a scrutiny committee, it was an action that we could look at this in a little bit more depth and work out what was going on in the background to this.
Yeah, and I think that's similar to Councillor White. Is that your suggestion that it can go in the handover note, but it might want to be logged in the action tracker as well to pass on to the whichever panel is looking at parking in the future. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So, Councillor Ganesh.
I also wanted to add that I think it will be good to know how much we are kind of spending on that service. I know it's like a self subsidizing its own income, or like the parking officers and people who work in that department. It's basically based on the income they generate. But if they're not able to collect a vast majority of the parking tickets, is it because the parking tickets were issued the wrong way? Like, were they not valid? Like, what's going on? I think there's a bigger issue that we need to probably look into it a little bit more. First of all, how much are we spending in that area, and how much are we collecting? Is it reasonable to assume that we could collect all of that, or are they valid tickets, or what's going on basically?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, and that all of that would go into what the relevant panel would be looking at. I imagine. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so I take it there are no further questions on this report. So thanks for that. Right, the next item is the Q3 corporate delivery plan update. So again, because this is the staff awards event this evening, we haven't got the service officers, nor do we have the strategic need for data and business available to respond on this item.
Going to introduce.
Yes, so I was just going to say that Taryn and Councillor Carlin are able to Taryn can introduce the report and they can respond on queries that relate to their remit, but otherwise anything else will have to be noted for a written response. Okay, thanks, Taryn. Would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. So this report presents Scrutiny Committee with the Q3 performance update on the Council delivery plan, outlining progress that has been made against the agreed delivery commitments areas of strong performance, and any emerging risks and challenges. It is overall a good news story. This is the fourth, I should note that this is the fourth and final performance update for the current corporate delivery plan cycle. There will be no quarter four performance report will be produced because there will be a new corporate delivery plan that will be developed post the May 2026 elections. And we will have a revised performance framework, a revised set of indicators that align with both the new CDP, the borough plan vision, and also the newly released local outcomes framework metrics, which I'll just say a little bit about. So in terms of headline progress, so I think building on the progress at Q2, Council continues to make strong delivery progress with 93% of outcomes rated green or amber at the end of Q3. The performance is presented, so unlike the finance report that you've just seen, which is presented by Directorate, the performance is presented by the 8 themes which are set out in the corporate delivery plan. The update, there is various appendices, and you've got a summary report that went to Cabinet, but you've also got detailed appendices which show the progress against each of the 188 individual activity lines, and then the KPIs are the key performance indicators are shown in Appendix 5. There's some real positives in there, as we say, kind of 93%, but there are some areas requiring attention that I should draw your attention to. There are 8 lines that are set out in the appendix that remain rated as red, and hopefully we have given the explanation as to why. I should note that this excludes the 5 that we previously reported as red, so in Q2, so we've tried not to repeat. So I think, if we were going to ask any questions, myself and Dana, or particularly written questions, there are 8 new that are rated as red. On the red rating, I suppose it is important to highlight, again, we had this conversation on the finance report, RAG rating is very subjective based. A red rating does not necessarily mean that nothing's been delivered at all. It means that essentially there are parts of that commitment that haven't been met, and hopefully they could be related to resourcing, affordability, etc. But hopefully the explanation that has been provided within the appendices shows that. We also include progress in terms of direction of travel. So 15% of activities have improved since the previous quarter, which is positive, and only 6 have declined, but the majority have remained fairly stable. If I could just mention, just before we dive into any detail, so looking ahead, as I mentioned, there will be new corporate delivery plan, but I would just ask to bring to the committee's attention that the Government House has now published, following a consultation, the Local Government Outcomes Framework, and that was published on the 9th of February, along with the final settlement. And essentially what that introduces is a national outcomes-based sets of measures, and that cuts across adults, children's, housing, and more universal services, roads, etc. So these metrics, what we really want to avoid is lots and lots of different sets of metrics. So we will be using these metrics that we have to report on each year, so they will be published as well nationally. We will be using these to inform the development of the new corporate delivery plan, and so these will be reported quarterly through the performance updates that you see at Scrutiny. I think, and I should say the actual indicators have been published, but the reporting of that, including the reporting by government, will not commence until after the elections. I suppose the only other thing that I wanted to mention to committee and kind of, that it's been an aspiration, I think, of mine all the way through the current year, so I'm going to really try to achieve this for next year, is that I'm really keen, or I believe that actually performance, our priorities and our finances and our risk essentially is one single conversation and one single narrative. So I suppose I really wanted to put on record, I know I've had various conversations over the year, in both in this forum but also more informally, you know, for 26-27, really want to get to that more integrated reporting. You know, we've considered a finance report tonight. We're now considering a performance report, but actually the two talk to each other, you know, and I think that gives the committee a much richer conversation in terms of, you know, where are we spending high and where are we performing high. That should be part of a single conversation. So I just, you know, given this is the last committee, I just wanted to put on record that that is something we are looking to introduce for next year.
Thanks for that, Taryn. I just wanted to note that, so obviously I'm noting that we're going to be looking at the development of a new corporate delivery plan that's going to be based on these government mandated metrics. I just recall that we went for quite some time previously when we were developing the current corporate delivery plan. We went for quite some time where we didn't have any performance data or reports to scrutinise, and I just want to be confident that scrutiny won't be in the same position once May has gone and the new corporate delivery plan is in development, that there's going to be something there for us to look at, so we can have an eye as scrutiny on performance.
Yeah, so I should say, in terms of our corporate delivery plan, a new corporate delivery plan, I should say, that will be developed in light of the council's priorities. And I'm going to say new priorities because it's a new corporate delivery plan. And I think what we're saying on the outcomes framework is that, you know, looking at the sets of measures, we will want to look to use where possible those performance measures to measure the success of the corporate delivery plan. It is likely that they won't cover everything. So we will have a new corporate delivery plan, a new set of priorities, and for me, key performance indicators, it's my background, measure the success of your delivery of the corporate delivery plan. Now, we will look to the national outcomes framework and the measures that are there, but we are likely to also want a small set of local measures as well that reflect the council's local priorities as well. The timescales, although they are not set in stone, the timescales for the new corporate delivery plan is likely to be, and I'm going to use autumn. I'm going to consciously talk about a season rather than a month so that no one holds me to account for saying the wrong time. The outcomes framework will start reporting the first reporting post-election. So they are a national set of indicators that we will need to report on anyway. So I think, Councillor White, there will be possibly like a hybrid type option. There could be some performance reporting through the outcomes framework, but it will probably be the autumn before we get to the complete set of reporting on the new corporate delivery plan.
Okay, that's fine, because the autumn's fine, because at the moment we're in a situation where we get performance updates on a 6-monthly basis to this committee. So if we're going to get it in autumn, that's fine. I just want it to be clear that is the ask, that we do get that. So if that could be noted, that's what we're asking for here. Okay, now does anyone have any questions on this report? Councillor Connor.
I have a list. So I'm very happy that these are noted and sent to the right directorates, because I understand that you're, you know, not able here to cover them all off. But I just wanted to first, so thank you, Taryn, for that sort of recommendation about the finance, performance and risk, and putting that together as a much more joined up approach, because I think that's going to really help for future scrutiny committee. So I just wanted to go on to page 180 on the adults and health, and this will be under public health. So this is a question to public health. It's got immunisation uptake improving. Can I just ask for a public health response on the measles vaccination? Because it was reported recently on the BBC website that Enfield and Haringey sort of were apparently the accounting for almost half of measles cases nationally. So I am very worried about what's going on there, and if we could get an update, a written update on that, that would be great. On page, next page actually, appendix 2, number of complaints upheld by the Ombudsman. Now, this is, I've got red rag rated 87% are upheld. So I'm just worried. I mean, this continues to be a problem, and this isn't, we've discussed this in the past. We know that this is an ongoing issue. This has just happened and it's new. So I think really it's around the strategies underpinning how we're going to improve this. That would be really helpful rather than just sort of speaking.
So these are being noted for written responses, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yes. No, sorry, it's scrutiny. So, yes. So, so just really understanding what's going on underneath, underpinning that around how that's going to improve, so that obviously we get our residents get their responses more quickly, and that we don't have so many decisions upheld. So really, I suppose it's understanding what's happening before it gets to the Ombudsman stage, what the process is there. On page 184, this might be Taryn. So implementation of the procurement modernisation programme. Now you've put that as red. So really, I think I just wanted to ask you around, you said it's due to a new e-procurement system, and that's not now going ahead. So I think the question for myself was understanding how much did we pay for this new e-procurement system, and if we did, how much have we then lost? Have we lost money by buying a system that we're now not using? Thanks.
If I come back on that, I can definitely answer the last one, but I'll leave for the others for written responses. And so look, I like to give a true rag rating. So the procurement modernisation programme has actually been in existence for 3 years. So there are large elements of the improvement programme that have been delivered, and that was particularly around preparing for the Procurement Act, which came into place last February. However, there is one aspect of that which has not been delivered. So we do currently have a procurement system, an e-procurement system. So this is essentially the system that we issue notices when we're going out for contracts, when we receive the tenders back. We do have a current system. However, there was an intention to replace that system to improve the alignment with the Procurement Act. That process was underway. However, a much wider project that is now underway is, which will be a report that comes to Cabinet over the next couple of months, is that we also need to replace our SAP system, which is essentially manages our finance, HR, and kind of payments. As a council, there is no choice. It's an aging system, and we're currently going through that process. I was really keen that we avoid having lots of different separate systems, and because of where we were with that e-procurement system, that we explored the opportunity of whether there was a single system that could serve all of our requirements. So therefore, it's rated red because we haven't delivered it. We haven't replaced the system. We have still got a system in place, but it's now being picked up as part of a wider programme. So you might argue I've been a bit harsh on myself saying it's completely red, but I think that's the kind of honest opinion. But it does relate to that one particular action. I have, however, gone on, and hopefully to give the committee a bit of assurance, as I say, the procurement improvement programme was very much about preparing for the Procurement Act. We know that this is an area that we need to improve on, right the way through from commissioning, tendering, procurement, right through to contract management. We absolutely acknowledge that. And so that has been superseded as well by the Commissioning Modernisation Programme, which is looking at that complete cycle. So I didn't want to paint a completely bleak picture. I've also given the committee a bit of an update about how we are now building on those good foundations and now taking it a step further through that, looking at our commissioning and contract management arrangements.
So in the finance report, sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, how much did we say in the fund? Oh, you mentioned in the finance report that this is currently generated in the savings. Is it 200,000? I'm sorry, I can't quite remember off the top of my head.
I think it's two separate, but was it in the savings? So within the finance report, there was a savings of 200,000. We we host the London Construction Partnership on behalf of London, which is essentially a series of a number of different frameworks that we manage on behalf of London, procure some of our own services through that, but also many other boroughs, both in London and just outside, use that. Started off largely for construction contracts, but actually it's been used for children's and adults, etc. So uh, that does generate a small income for us, and we had predicated a saving in year around increased income. However, with the Procurement Act, what came to light was, again, try not to get too technical, there is one particular route to procurement called a dynamic purchase system that what the intention that we had in terms of how we use those through the LCP and to generate a small amount of income. Unfortunately, the Procurement Act didn't allow us to do that. So therefore, that is lost income. We won't be able to generate that income full stop. And therefore we're looking, well, as set out, we have identified some mitigations by holding vacancies within team. So two slightly separate, but yeah.
Thanks. I was just trying to work out, because you put savings against this, so I'm just working out how it was like 9 million over a 3-year period. So yeah, I was just wondering if that 200,000 related to that first, it was different. Right. Okay. Thank you. I'll stop there and let others, because I've got a few more, but I'll let others.
I mean, you're very quickly going through the same list that I've got. So I'll let you. Why don't you just carry on, and then if I've got anything
All right.
left over.
Right. Okay. So I've got the children and youth justice system and Amber. So yes. So yeah, we've coordinated. Theme 3 on page 186. So yeah, but the direction is a negative direction. So it just showed. I mean, I know the numbers aren't huge, but I'm just wondering if we could have a response around what's underpinning that, and is there any extra work that we should be doing in order to improve that process? Yeah, written response. And then I had adults and health, which is probably no surprise, on 188. So, oh yes, read, it was a percentage of people in adult social care extremely or very satisfied with service and support, and the clients having a good quality of life, but again, the direction was negative. So I know there's been a carers strategy that's sort of coming through, but I'm just trying to work out why this one is going in the wrong direction, because is this to do with care assessments? So I'm just trying to work out which bit of the system is causing that to be on red. And then on page 192, I had repairs, which are red. So again, that's repairs fixed first time. That's something that councillors will get a lot of correspondence from residents around. So again, that is dropping. So again, it's what's happening.
Was that we're being very careful in terms of asbestos testing, and so so that's affecting the repaired first time, because if they go out and repaired first time means that they just go out and they repair. It's often emergency repairs, but if they go out and there's a possibility that there's asbestos, somebody has to come back and check that there's asbestos before, whether there is asbestos before they can repair it, and that means that the repairs, that's what's causing that figure to dip. That's the reason that I was given.
Thanks for that. Thanks.
Get a written answer.
Yeah,
but that was the reason.
I think we will still still ask for a written answer on that. But thanks for that, Councillor Carlin.
lightings, because green just seems, it's what's behind that, I think, is important to understand. And then we did say that there's a raw number of domestic abuse events saw a slight rise compared to the previous month in December. Now, I know it's lower than some of the other ones that you've mentioned, and a rise across London as a whole. But I'm just trying to work out, is there what's underneath this that we're saying that other than the figures, is there something else that we are doing in Haringey that is supporting people who victims of domestic abuse? So I think it was just a little bit more clarity around that rather than just those figures, because I'm not sure that gave the whole story. And then on theme 6, reduction of violence against women and girls on page 197. So I was expecting this to be, again, statistically we're doing well, but actually this is an increase in the number of safe havens and local businesses for women to use at night. So I didn't know if that actually is reducing violence against women and girls. I mean, having these safe havens is a great, offer, but actually, are they being used? Do people know about them? Is this actually helping? Has anyone done anything to understand whether this is actually supporting women at night and whether they have understood? Because I have got absolutely no clue where a safe space, if I was walking around, I don't know where any safe space would be. I'd just go in somewhere that was open and lit and hope, but I don't know how I would know. And my girls certainly don't know that this exists. And so how are we communicating this so that people know to be able to go and find that out? So that was a bit, I was a bit unsure about. And then page 198, lighting in parks. So again, it's all great 'cause it's around safety, but I do know that I really tried to sort out, I won't tell you which road it was, but it was a small alley, coming up to Alley Pally, and it was almost impossible to sort out the lighting. And I was getting so many emails from residents saying, well, mainly women, saying they felt really unsafe, but it took an inordinate amount of time. In the end, I managed to get the foliage cut back. I didn't get anywhere on lighting. So, I mean, it's great that it's there, and this new the council streets lighting engineer and designing out crime officer and everything else that goes with it. But when we're as councillors asking for improving lighting in streets on the ground, I find that I don't get necessarily a massively positive response. So I don't think I'm not saying that's an officer issue. I'm just saying that I just don't know what they understand about funding and where the lighting, what the priority should be for improving lighting in this area. So again, it was just really to try and understand who's leading on that and how we can find out as councillors, because I think all councillors will be really interested in this, and how we know about it, and then we can respond to residents in the right way to support them. Thanks. That was it. To you.
Was that everything?
Yes.
Okay. Can I just check? I think I might have missed it. When you asked about repairs, did you ask about the voids as well?
No.
The voids, yeah. So there was a point on the voids under theme 5, amber and going down, and I think it's similarly to the repairs. We just need to know what's going on with that and why that's getting worse. What's being done to address that, and then on theme 8, there were a couple of things as well. I think on page 201, on theme 8, the employment rate of 16 to 64-year-olds is red, got worse. So I suppose the question is whether the employment support that we're delivering through Haringey Works is working effectively, because obviously if it was, that should be going in the other direction. And the other thing was lost it now. Something about planning. Lost where that is now. Oh yeah. Oh, that's right at the top. Sorry. Percentage of non-major planning applications decided on time. It's green, but it's it's getting worse. So what's being done to ensure that this decline doesn't continue and that we move out of the green territory? That's all. Does anyone have any other questions on this this item? Obviously, these are all for written responses. If anyone has anything further, then they can add it in writing, and we can get further written responses. But no, looks like it's like, oh, Councillor Lawton.
Oh, just a couple of additions. One was about the employment rate of 16 to 64-year-olds, which is on page 201. They did, I believe this, I'm a little bit confused by the statistics, I suppose, here, because it says that our employment rates places it notably below both the London-wide average and the range observed amongst similar boroughs. So it seems to me, sorry, if this was this the scrutiny paper? Sorry, I think I'm getting confused between two different things here. Were you presented with a scrutiny paper at your panel in adults about unemployment? In this one, it wasn't an additional one that came to you. Actually, can I write a question on this, Chair? Because I have a much longer question on this. Then
Yeah, if you want to submit that as a written question,
it's a
that
more
would
it's a
be-
longer
yeah,
written
yeah,
question.
yeah.
Can I submit it? Like that? Thank you.
Fine. Okay, thanks. Was that it? You said you had a couple of points. No. Okay. Any further questions can come as written questions. Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, then we'll finish that item then. Obviously with quite a lot of written answers due to come. Obviously, this is the last meeting of Overview and Scrutiny Committee for this 4-year term of this administration. So before you guys leave, I'd just like to thank all three of you, Taryn, Heidi and Councillor Carlin, because you've basically been to every single meeting of this committee for like 3-4 years. So thank you very much for your patience in coming along, answering all our questions and providing us with a lot of detailed answers and sitting through everything that's happened on this committee. So thank you very much, and you're free to go and do whatever you like with your evenings now, whatever's left of it. Okay, thank you very much. We've just got a few other items to deal with before we finish. So item 11 is the terms of reference for the joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee for this part of London. So this is new terms of reference that were agreed at JOSC, not the meeting we had earlier this week, but a couple of months ago, was it? Something like that. So it's been approved by JOSC, and if it's approved by this committee tonight, it's going to be ratified by full council on Monday. Obviously, it needs to be agreed by the other 4 councils as well to come into force. So a key part of this report is how this joint scrutiny committee is resourced, which has been a little bit of a bone of contention that we spent a lot of time discussing, particularly as despite the fact that this committee has representatives from 5 boroughs and represents those 5 boroughs equally, it's been Haringey that's been providing the administrative support for that committee without any financial contribution or contribution in kind at all from the other boroughs. So we've come up with a interim solution to that. But I'm going to actually leave it to Councillor Connor to say anything further on this, because it's actually Councillor Connor that chairs the North Central London JOSC. So go ahead.
Thank you. And as the chair has rightly pointed out, is I think quite how you put it, but there is an agreement now in place around how we get officers to clerk for the scrutiny. It's not ideal. And just to note for your own information that we are still going through a letter to all the chief execs signed by all the committee members to try and get us focused a little bit more obviously, I suppose, in how that's done. But at the moment, the terms of reference are set, they're in, and they're to be agreed tonight. Just one point that I just wanted to mention on 3.2 in the papers on page 1. At 3.2, it just says, therefore, the terms of reference will also be subject to further review later in the year when further details are known around the governance arrangements of the new ICB. So the two ICBs are joining up together. So North Central London and North West London are the ICBs are joining, but at the moment the JOS are staying separate. We're staying to our original 5 boroughs, just purely because we think trying to scrutinise 13 boroughs is a tall order, and the JOS would be enormous if we added all the other councillors on as well. So for practical reasons and to make it efficient, to keep it efficient. So therefore, we haven't said that we are going to review anything in the later this year in regards to the terms of reference. Our terms of reference are set. They've been agreed. It's entirely up to the next JOS if they want to change the terms of reference, but that's up to them. We're not suggesting at this point that they do in the next year, because at the moment we've all agreed that the JOS should remain as is.
So in that case, should we amend recommendation
Yes.
2 to say that we note that that the JOSC is going to remain in place as is,
Yeah.
with these terms of reference, despite the fact that the North Central London and North West London ICBs are merging?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So so with that amendment, then, are we happy to agree the recommendations? Great, that's agreed. Okay, thank you very much. So that's the JOSC terms of reference. Item 12 is new items of urgent business. We don't have any of those. So we can go on to item 13, which is the work programme. And under this item, we've got a number of scrutiny reviews to deal with. So we've got 2 reports that are ready to agree, approve and send to Cabinet with their recommendations. We've got 2 other reports that still need some additional work. So let's deal with those first. So first of all, Councillor Gunnish, were you going to provide us an update on the report on walking and cycling safely?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So what walking and cycling safety scrutiny review was agreed by the previous, this was before I became the chair. So the Culture, Community Safety and Environment Scrutiny Panel set out to review the progress of the implementation of walking and cycling action plan at their meeting in March 2025. When I became the chair of the panel, and we had a discussion, and the panel felt it's important to refine and narrow down the scope of the review so that we can the panel can decide to focus on the review on walking and cycling action plan in the context of exploring what does safety safe cycling look like for everyone in Haringey, for cyclists and pedestrians. So the review explores the impact of the safety as a result of increased cycling in the borough, current and proposed infrastructure to support cyclists in the borough, the increased public concerns with the danger posed by e-bikes obstructing pavements, and the challenges with enforcement. Then the panel has held evidence gathering session with, we already had our evidence gathering session both with cabinet members and relevant directors, as well as with some of the stakeholders representing various different groups. So we had Councillor Chadwani, Cabinet Member for Resident Services and Tackling Inequality, and we had Councillor Ibrahim Ali, Cabinet Member for Climate Action and Environment, and we had Rob Kowalski, Director of Planning and Building Standards, and Maurice Richards, Head of Transport, Travel and Building Standards, and Naima Isan, the Principal Transport Planner. As well as that, we had key stakeholders such as Joint Partnership Board, the LADA Community Safety Partnership, and Haringey Cycling Campaign, to name a few, have also presented, and like those 3 different groups presented and submitted evidence and their recommendation to the panel. So the key findings are, one of the key findings we discovered by looking at police data is that there has unfortunately been an increase in collision rate for both pedestrians and cyclists, with the increase in cycling over the past couple of years. The panel will also be closely monitoring the progress of the new dockless bike contracts. What's the next step? So obviously the review is still going on, like we haven't concluded. We have the first part of the evidence gathering session. The panel has a clear direction of the next steps to take as part of the review. So exploring best practices in other authorities is like Islington, and analyzing some of the outcomes of the consultation on commonplace, and we look forward to making further progress in the new municipal year. So the interim report will be circulated. Okay, so the basically the rest of the work will be carried out in the new municipal year after the election, but it's the heart of it would be to look into the safeties and is it safe to cycle and walk in Haringey? So
Thank you,
That-
Councillor Ganesh. And it's obviously, you know, we're in a particular point with this review. We're handing it over now. We don't know who's going to be on scrutiny or who's going to be, you know, chairing which panels. So I suppose the suggestion is that this goes as part of the handover the handover report, and for for scrutiny to pick up again after May.
Scrutiny to sort of conclude finish the rest of the work, and then I mean, this report was always going to be a short kind of focus type of report. So half of the work is done, but the other half that we need to still do more. Yeah, whoever, then the next committee can pick it up and finish it.
Okay, that's fine. I suppose the only issue is that the panel itself doesn't roll over, does it? So we need to kind of the scrutiny will need to re-establish the panels again. So we kind of need to take this partially completed review on and pass it forward to scrutiny for whichever panel that is set up that is responsible to take that forward. So we'll just leave that to go forward in that manner.
And the main committee can obviously make the decision about where's the most appropriate scrutiny panel for that to go.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, and similarly, Councillor Connor, you have a review that's in a similar situation.
We do indeed. Thank you, Chair. So we were doing issues around communication with residents. So this has been a long-standing issue. I think all councillors have this, that residents say we don't get the information, it's not in a timely manner, they don't understand who to contact, they don't understand when people will be responding to them. So this really came from in 2024, in September, the Scrutiny Cafe, where we got lots of feedback that residents really wanted us to look into how they communicated with council and the council communicated back with them. So we undertook quite a short, we narrowed down our what we were concentrating in on, and we just really went to like the bread and butter of what the council should be doing well and clearly, and just concentrated on that. And in fact, when we went to the joint partnership board, where we had quite a number of residents there who bring up quite a few issues, one of the areas that we were looking at was safeguarding referrals, and their concerns were so sort of, they seemed something that could be actioned quite quickly with officers. So not only is a recommendation within this report, but we have sent those straight back to officers and say, look, this seems to be quite a fundamental issue. Please, can these be resolved? And these were things like, so if you made a safeguard, if you're trying to make a safeguarding referral, that actually the phone lines were manned and that somebody answered the call, because that actually wasn't happening, even though we thought they were. The digital safeguarding referrals should receive an automatic response. So if you sent off an email, you get a response saying, thank you, it has been received. You think, oh, it's gone to the right department, that's actually going to happen. And then it tells you this is a clear timeline for when you're going to get a response, which is also really helpful, because people are saying, do I wait 3 weeks to sort this out? Do I email them again? And then it then supplies following on about contact details. So if you get that initial conversation with somebody and you're part of that safeguarding process, but who do you contact again? Do you go back into the system and try all again, which is what people were telling us. So we were asking that actually, can we have a reference number so their safeguarding referral could be tracked? So somebody who picks up the phone the next day isn't that person, actually says, hang on a minute, I know exactly where that is now and I can tell you what's going on. So there's a reference. So that was, I think, for the panel members and members of the Joint Partnership Board, I think it was quite good that we were able to sort of go, right, we hear what you're saying. Actually, these really shouldn't take a lot of sorting out. We just need to get this done well. So that's gone straight to heads of service in that respect. We've also got general communications issues. We've got an area on adult social care directory, the Haringey Council's website, which isn't the easiest to navigate, I think, for councillors as well as for residents, and then that information about how you access adult social care. The adult social care directory is a long-standing issue. It used to be called Harry Care. I don't think anyone ever knew that it existed, and they never quite knew what was going on with that. So there's this new directory that is just being developed. So we're just making recommendations in that area to try and make it as consumer friendly as possible, so that our residents can actually find out services when they need to. The work is pretty much done. So what we're going to do is finish working on this in the next month, sort of off key, just Dominic's working on it, just making sure these are strengthened and, put out in the right way. And then, so the completed report would then go through to the next Overview and Scrutiny Committee for, and then whoever is doing adults and health will then take this report to Cabinet. As long as Overview and Scrutiny accepted the report, then it would obviously go to Cabinet and the next chair would be representing that report. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Okay, so everyone's happy for that to go forward in that manner? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Lawson, you have a completed review.
Yes, so we undertook a review into recommendations that could be made around our services to under ones in the borough. It was a pretty extensive review because obviously it's a huge, it's a huge time period, to be honest, whole first year of life. And there's many services that are involved in that period, obviously from healthcare professionals to childcare. So we tried to narrow the scope and focus on sort of taking it away from the healthcare side and the health visiting and the vaccination side, not because it's not important, just because it was too big to do all of that at once. So we focused in a lot more on kind of the day-to-day experience of an under one in this borough, and both a childcare perspective and a kind of stay and play maternity leave thing. We did evidence gathering in multiple different settings. We spoke to lots of different academic experts in this period of life, and we spoke to people in the borough childminders. We went to children's centres, family hubs, and spoke to different loads of different people that kind of connected that period, including obviously many parents in the borough. What we found was a few main recommendations essentially that we've come out with. So the first one is to do with a kind of political lobbying piece around the current situation, which is that the government funds babies from 9 months old to have some level of childcare now, but this is only for working parents. So essentially the emphasis is on getting parents back to work, but actually the evidence is very clear that for most children, particularly children from more socioeconomically deprived backgrounds, it would be very beneficial for them to be in childcare, even if their parents aren't working for one reason or another. So we recommended a piece around extending that childcare option to all families, and particularly looking at families on universal credit, and starting there, not just families who are, because essentially what seems to be from our evidence gathering is that the children that are accessing that free childcare were the children who would already be in childcare, really. And yes, it's great that that's lessening the burden of that childcare cost on those parents, but it isn't actually enabling children to access childcare that weren't before. And it's not even enabling really parents to work that weren't before, because of the real term number increases and how much you have to earn to make that worthwhile, and what kinds of jobs you have to be doing, etc. So that was one piece. Another one was just simply a communications piece to do with an online, very simple directory across borough around what services we have for children. So you've got your 7-month-old, you're on your maternity leave. What can I do today that's free in Haringey? Not just necessarily the local centre down the road, but across the borough. What's going on? What types of provisions? That's not out there at the moment. There isn't a kind of one-stop shop, and it's all very dependent on individual hubs to advertise separately. So a communications piece and a social media piece around that. Another one was to do with childminders. We spoke childminders. At the moment, the option of childminding is severely reduced in the borough. Lots of childminders have stopped operating for multiple reasons, we found out. But what it means is both parental choice isn't as good, because you don't have that option, which a lot of parents prefer, especially with younger children. But also the childminders were speaking specifically on the fact that they can't access Haringey provision easily, because if they, for example, go to a stay and play, and I understand it because they're a private business, so if they're going to a stay and play and they're sort of taking over the stay and play, some of those stay and plays don't want them to do that because they want it to be accessible for parents going on their own. The problem though then is you're kind of shunned out of all public spaces. So as a recommendation around, could we use our libraries, could we have a better partnership with childminding businesses, etc. And the final one was talking about antenatal support. So at the moment you have a very two-tiered system. Essentially you have a kind of NHS free offer, which is mostly online post-COVID, and it's very focused on the education itself. So you'll find out about pain relief during birth, or you'll find out about, I don't know, different methods of labour, and they give you that information and you log off, and that's that. And then you've got people who are prepared to pay privately, or who can afford to pay privately, who go to NCT or parent groups or whatever, £300, and they find out relatively similar information, but they're also making a group of friends, and they're also plugging into a network, and they're also starting that journey with a group of people. We don't have anything like that at the moment that's accessible to everyone. So we felt that a lot of the parents we spoke to, their early days and weeks was already affected by the fact that they knew some people had that and some people simply didn't. So that was our final recommendation. As you alluded to, Chair, the review is essentially finished now. Because of the Ofsted and the officers right at the end, it got slightly delayed, and therefore to go to Cabinet and this administration seems unlikely. So again, we were sort of I'm proposing that we take this as kind of approved by this committee once you see the full review, and hopefully if we have a relatively simple version of a children and young people's panel next time, they can kind of rubber stamp it and take it to Cabinet if they're happy with that, but that they'll know that the work has already been finished and approved by this committee. Of course, they'd formally have to approve it again to take it to Cabinet next time.
So just to be clear, you're asking, this sounds like an absolutely, it's a fantastic piece of work with great recommendations. Are you just suggesting that we agree this tonight with the proviso that you might want to make minor
Yeah, there's no major changes that will be made.
Yeah.
I'll send you the full document, so you can.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yes, but there's no major changes will be made.
So-
The review stands as the review is. I just don't think it will go to cabinet in this.
So
session,
similarly
as
to
far as I understand.
what we did with your panels review
Yeah.
last time,
Yeah.
we're agreeing for this to go forward to cabinet from
Yeah.
this committee with the proviso that you might want to
Essentially, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
If
I think
people feel
that's
happy
fine.
with what
Yeah.
they've seen and read and heard, I'm happy to take any questions, of course.
I mean, I just think it's essential because I had free, you know, I didn't even think about it, but now, yeah, I mean, I had free support and I just used to go and that group of friends was essential. I don't know how I'd coped actually. So I didn't realise that there wasn't anything now for people. So you know, that third recommendation in particular it speaks to me. So yeah,
And it was amazing, by the way, as part of the review, like I will like to add, because obviously the recommendations are the things we can improve, but I was actually amazed at the offer, as in terms of how many things there are in the borough and the amazing, like honestly, the family hubs and the children's centre, I really felt that there was a lot on, and breastfeeding support and really beautiful, free at the point of delivery, accessible to all stuff going on, which is amazing. Obviously the recommendations are focusing on what we could be doing better, but sort of just to add that, because actually it was very heartwarming to see an area that was lovely. And I feel that we're doing in many ways better and better, but other things, particularly I think COVID, have maybe pushed us back in something.
Well, I was, yeah, I mean, I'll bring you in. I was just going to say that I totally agree with what's just been said, and that social aspect is really key, not just for the parents, but also for the kids, as they, you know, my nieces, you know, they've still got social connections with other kids that were
Yeah.
bumps at the time the parents met, you know, and that's so important. Can't all be done online. Sorry, Councillor Gunnar.
Yeah, no, I think I really like the report and some like really good recommendation. I just wanted to pick up something that you mentioned, like in terms of like that 9 months, like i.e. that offer of free childcare being offered to potentially parents from more socioeconomically kind of disadvantaged kind of backgrounds. So my understanding of sort of like working in the early years provisions in the past is like a child that's been taken care of or nurtured by a parents, it's far more beneficial than any kind of setting. Like you don't have to send your child earlier on into the childcare sort of environment if you can look after it yourself. So I was quite interested that the evidence you were saying is like it's showing the opposite, that those children will benefit. So I was like, where is that evidence coming from? I suppose just a
Yeah, so on my limited understanding from the evidence we looked at, I'm not an expert in this area, but from what I understand, you are right that in a kind of, if we were to say an ideal, whatever that means, there's no such thing as a perfect home, but you know, in a home where yes, there's love and there's care and there's enough provision, definitely children, young babies are actually best off with that individual key caregiver, you know, often a mother, but can also be a father or another parent or carer who's the kind of default and main caregiver. Where that starts to shift is if that parent doesn't have the ability or the time or the money to make those same what the experts that we were talking to were calling high level connections. So in, you know, whether that's conversations, being able to sit down on the floor, get down and play. If somebody's running around 5 other kids, there's a lot going on. Actually, the evidence now, because our childcare actually is very high quality, if they were to have some time in that key worker setting, that would really help and benefit even very young children. We're not talking, when I say very young, I don't mean 3-4-month-old babies, but definitely by 1-2 years old. The evidence states that there's benefits to being in a setting where they can have those high quality interactions with other adults. Of course, we also have just this divide where, because more and more babies now are accessing nursery because of the funding, you then have a kind of a bigger divide when you get closer to the 3-year funding, which is when it becomes universal, where the children who've not been in any kind of childcare then join at that point, and they're much less used to obviously being in a setting or being around other children. There was a situation previously where 2-year-olds could get 15 hours of funding if they had a specific healthcare plan or social work involvement, and it even extended to mostly to children on in families in universal credit. What's happening now is we simply don't have enough childcare necessarily to reach everyone's needs because of the 9-month-olds coming in. So it's not necessarily in a nursery's interest to make sure that they can meet those 2-year-old needs. So because you've got enough children coming in as babies. So then actually a lot of people were saying to us that those children who were coming before because of a specific social needs now aren't able to access the same amount of childcare. So again, it's maybe about talking about extending that, because if they started at 9 months, you wouldn't have the same problem. The problem is if the setting is full by 2, as it were, then those 2-year-olds don't get a first port of call anymore. And of course, it comes down to how the government funding works, because remember, all the funding is based on term time only. Most jobs aren't term time only, so parents are having to either top up or work something out, which already looks different for different parents depending on what they can manage. So basically, you're right that a high quality connection to a parent is probably your best case scenario in the early months of life, but not all things are created equal, so sometimes it depends on what that looks like.
Okay, thank you. So we're happy to agree for this to go forward, with the potential for minor amendments. Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's agreed. Okay, so the last thing we've got is the scrutiny review on the prevention of violence against women and girls, which comes from the main committee itself. Draft report was circulated to the committee at the end of February, and there's been some feedback there. As a result of that, there's been some minor changes that have been made to the recommendations. So there's a printed copy of the final draft with the recommendations in front of you, hopefully. However, there were also some suggestions for more substantive changes to the recommendations, which have been circulated by email. Has everyone had a chance to have a look at those? Yeah. Okay. All right. No. Dominic, would you like to just clarify what changes have been made in the report?
Yes, so there's actually 4 minor changes to the recommendations. You should have the table there on page 4 of the report. So I'll just take you briefly through each one. They don't substantially change the recommendations, they just sort of improve them a little bit. That's based on the feedback that we had by email. So on number 7 on family hubs, that's just added a little section at the end that said that advice, guidance and referrals to support services should be provided within all family hubs. So that's sort of based on some of the discussion that we had on that. Number 8, which was a recommendation to proactively involve young people in the development of the new Vorg strategy for Haringey. There's just been a section added to make sure that clarifies it's across different communities and different areas of the borough. And there's a little bit of narrative text in the main report on that. Number 9, it just says about strong emphasis on the needs of children and young people affected by Vorg in the new local strategy, and there's just added on including online harms, because there is a section in the report which does talk about some of the online harms, and obviously the new Online Safety Act has been very relevant to that recently. And then finally down the bottom on number 14, so there was a recommendation on the Supreme Court ruling. So it's actually a recent change. So the sentence that you've got there under number 14 is unchanged. What's different is that there was an additional sentence which said that we needed to wait for the EHRC ruling or guidance, sorry, in order to do this. On the advice of legal, that's actually not necessary for us to put that in there. I don't think I think the view is that they don't need to wait for that to actually implement the Supreme Court ruling. But in any case, it's for the Cabinet to respond on what action they're taking. So it was just a bit of an unnecessary sentence that we had in there. So we've taken that out, and it's just a clearer recommendation that we just think that wants to be reassured that a full review has been established and carried out. So those are the 4 that have been changed since the end of February. I don't know if there's any comments on that, or whether after that we can move on to the possible new ones that are not in there.
Okay, does anyone have any comments or questions on those amendments that have been made already? Okay. No?
Okay, so the new possible new ones then, there was basically on numbers 1 and 6. Now the reason they're not being included is because I'm not sure that we have the full sort of evidence to support them. These were put forward by Councillor Mason. So recommendation number 1 talks about the introduction of mandatory domestic abuse awareness training for all council staff, which is going to be happening. And we've just got a bit in there about monitoring that and assessing the impact of that. So in the email circulated today, Councillor Mason suggested that there should also be mandatory specialist training for those who deliver services. Basically, the reason being that would be higher level training to enable certain services to develop increased expertise. So we did take some evidence on the training, which is reflected in the existing recommendation 1. It's a perfectly reasonable ask to beef that up. I just don't know if we actually covered that in the evidence sessions, but it's sort of up for discussion as to whether we want to take that forward any further. And then the other one was on recommendation 6, which is the whole school approach. So our recommendation is that the council should aspire to developing a whole school approach. I think the reason it's worded like that, when we spoke to the Director for Public Health, I think it was certainly reflected. This was going to be one of the most resource intensive of all of our recommendations, because it is it would be a whole programme of work. It's not something that is done in most boroughs of London. I think there's been a pilot project in Croydon. So it's something that we would certainly need additional resources or funding to be able to do. So that's why it's sort of worded as we should aspire to develop this. It's almost like a long-term objective, really. The recommendations, there was 2 points made by Councillor Mason. One was that a detailed implementation programme should be submitted within 12 months, and the other one that funding should be sought to develop a pilot programme, a pilot project. So obviously that just goes beyond the conversation that we originally had with the Director for Public Health. Again, it's beefing that recommendation up, but it's whether it's asking a bit too much possibly at this stage, given the resources available to the council. But again, up for discussion with the committee. So I'll probably just pause there just on those 2, just we might want to think about.
Okay, so how do people feel about the beefing up of those 2 recommendations?
I was going to say, if there's any issues, the Cabinet can come back and say why there would be issues, around doing that. So yeah, no, I'm happy with that.
Yep. So it seems that we're in agreement on those both suggested strengthenings of those recommendations. And then there's a new recommendation proposed as well.
Yes, so I'll just read this one out. So this, given the short-term nature of some government-funded projects, the VORG team are asked to assemble the end of project reports with a brief introduction on the learnings and future viabilities of projects in the lifetime of the upcoming strategy. So I guess this is an issue that frequently comes up with certain bits of funding have 1-year limit or 3-year limits, and what happens to those projects after that. So I guess it's addressing that point. Again, I don't know if we went into that in much depth in the evidence that we took. So that's my only reservation about that one, really. I mean, it seems like a reasonable point. It's just we always have to try and connect this to something that we have got in the main body of the report or evidence that we took.
And just to clarify, is there any negative consequence if somebody were to say, that recommendation you've got there, that doesn't link to any evidence that you've got in the report? What happens then?
Well, I mean, I guess it's just good practice in scrutiny to link all of your recommendations to evidence. So that's what we endeavour to do, basically. I mean, I guess I could do sort of some desktop research on or look back at the previous strategy as to whether this was an issue with some of the shorter term projects, or whether it came up in any of the transcripts at all. Yeah. Okay,
thanks. I suppose we could just, if we just decide that we decide something's a good idea. It's also possible. It's up to us. Okay. Right. How do people feel about this recommendation? I mean, it seems like a reasonable recommendation, as Dominic's said.
Yeah.
Other than the reservation that we don't have the evidence in the report to support it, but I don't see a problem with adopting that recommendation. Are we happy? Okay, all right. So we're
Do I have discussion today? When we're reviewing it?
I do know what you mean though. Just in terms of like the temptation when you're writing a scrutiny review, because I found this even with mine to just be like, this makes sense. Why don't we say that? And so there's just like, I do see the good practice argument of like not making recommendations just based on our own instincts. But at the same time, I feel this one specifically is kind of, I don't feel it's so out there. If it was something really extreme and kind of out there, then I think I'd have higher reservations. I think this seems pretty obviously sensible within the remit of the piece of work. So,
okay, great. So just to be clear, then we're agreeing to all three of the suggestions that are listed in that email that's been circulated for new recommendations or new additions to existing recommendations. Okay, so on that basis and with those amendments to the recommendations, are we happy to agree this to go forward to Cabinet, which will be presumably the first Cabinet of the new municipal year? Yep,
Yes.
we all happy?
Yes.
Okay, so that's agreed. Wow, that scrutiny review has taken a long time. A long time. It's possibly, might be a record setter, that one. Right, okay. I think that's the end of the meeting, other than to note that we don't know when our next meeting is because the calendar hasn't been decided yet. So next meeting to be, we do not know. It's a mystery. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose just in closing this meeting, first of all, need to thank Dominic for all his hard work, not just on the scrutiny review that we just agreed, but also supporting this committee. And also to thank the other scrutiny officers, Philip and Fowler, for all their hard work for supporting not just the scrutiny committee, but the panels and JOSC, of course. Dominic, you spent a lot of time supporting JOSC. Yeah, so thank you very much. And thanks also to the committee members, Councillor Small, who's not here, for all your hard work and dedication in scrutinising everything the council does. Yeah, so
Then it
maybe
leaves it to me as the vice chair to say thank you to Councillor White for chairing so effectively and so efficiently. And thank you very much. I know sometimes it looks all calm on the surface, doesn't it? But there's a huge amount of work that goes underneath this to make sure that it's got that slightly more calmer approach on the top. So thank you very much, because I know how hard getting all this stuff together is. So thanks.
thank you very much. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. We've end of the meeting.
Okay.